Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I am excited and elated to be joined by the distinguished scholar, Professor Adolph Reed Jr. Professor Reed is a big influence in my life and a lot of other people's lives. We got a lot of response when I mentioned that he was going to be coming on. So we are just extremely excited to have this very important conversation and to unpack some of the things that he has done historically and in this particular election. But before I bring him on, let me just read just a little bit about him. I know everyone listening probably already knows this, but Professor Reed is a professor of political science at the University of Pennsylvania, specializing in race and American politics. He's previously taught at Yale, Northwestern, the New School for Social Research, contributor and columnist with The Progressive and The Nation. He is a public intellectual and a public scholar, and we are so excited to have him here tonight. Professor Reed, how are you?
Oh, good. And thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet, pleasure to be on.
Excellent. And it's definitely, we're honored to have you here. We're so excited about the conversation that we can have. But if you would allow me to first start with today's news, and I want you to get to weigh in on it. President Obama has come out in full support and endorsement of Hillary Clinton. For me, it's no surprise. It's very much expected. But just from your vantage point and all of the historical calculations that you make, what do you think about this endorsement and what it means for progressives, African Americans, and just the entire gambit?
Well, I mean, like you say, it's not a surprise. I mean, I think it's a marker of good party decorum that he held off from doing it officially until after she passed the delegate total that she needed. I mean, I think everyone's known all along that he was going to endorse her. So, and I mean, it's kind of funny, when you think about it. I mean, they are in 2008, the big Clintonist fundraisers apparently thought that he was a better representative of their agenda than she was. So now they're just kind of passing the baton back and forth.
Yeah, I like what you said there in terms of it is a good decorum that he even waited this long. I don't think anyone should be shocked or surprised, but some people are a little dismayed, I would say, to put it lightly, that President Obama, who at one time considered Hillary Clinton to be a liar, to be someone who will say anything to get political power, now is endorsing this and wants us to support this very same person. Is this just the cost of high-level politics, that who once was your political rival that you had to eviscerate, now you have to throw your support behind? And what would you say to the people who are consider themselves to the left, progressives and African Americans who are really disappointed in this?
Well, gee, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I've often said that it's better, that's often better to be in the right place at the right time than it is to know anything or than to be smart, right? And in that sense, it's like parallel to my personal motto, it's better to be lucky than to be good. And I just happen to have been in what I've sometimes described lately as the birthing room at the outset of Obama's political career, because I lived in a state Senate district that he came out of when he emerged, and I was close to his predecessor in office. And that's all like kind of a long way of saying there shouldn't have been any reason to be surprised about or disappointed about anything that Obama's done in his presidency. I mean, he's never been other than what he is now. He's never purported really to be, to be more left than he is. I mean, he's kind of specialized in giving the appearance of a simulacra of being progressive, but it's a progressive, as a way to put it, that's disconnected from any particular content. Like it's more connected with who he is, and the circular thing has always been kind of like saying, well, I know it looks like I'm doing something that's not consistent with progressive politics, but it has to be because I'm progressive, and therefore anything I do is progressive.
Right.
that said, I mean, she was a Secretary of State. They haven't really differed very much about things. I said in 2008 that in some issues she was even a little bit to the left of him. And I mean, I think that that the differences between them really aren't really very meaningful, I don't think.
Yeah, I had a conversation. I think it's about 3 weeks ago with Professor Eddie Glaude, and in his book, he was talking about how we green screened President Obama, and we projected onto him all of these expectations of progressivism and pro-blackness that he, in fact, was communicating something entirely different. And I love what you said, that if we really shouldn't be disappointed, because if we were paying attention, we would have heard exactly his goals from the time he took the national stage, 2004, in terms of a mainstream national audience. He's always communicated that he wanted to do this. He would never use the word triangulation, but in fact, it was, to find this common ground with Republicans and conservatives. And he communicated that to us, but somehow he had the ability, or it was just our weakness, to project onto him this progressivism and this pro-blackness that he, in fact, wasn't trying to convey. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. And, moreover, I mean, he has actually said it, right? I mean, he said it in two different ways, at two different points. I mean, his first memoir came out when we were involved in the state Senate fight, and I didn't bother to read it. I mean, it just seemed like, sort of pat memoir. And the second one came out, I think, in 04 or something like that, 05, and I didn't want to read either of them, but when I signed a deal to work on a book that was initially a book about Obama mania, I thought I had to read them both. And when I read them, I was kind of surprised, because he says in one of them, I forget which one it is, but that's part of his gift. That part of his gift is that he has a knack for convincing people that he believes what they believe, or what they want to believe that he believes. And from one perspective, you can say, well, that's what fancy law school training is all about, right? And we notice, well, the second moment that I wanted to mention where he came clean was maybe many of the viewers will remember that after he sewed up the nomination in 08, within days there was like this blitz of hard sprint to the right, where he kibitzed on the Supreme Court's ruling that overturned the D.C. gun control law, and he didn't have to say anything about it, but he did it. He said something else. He said he was disappointed about another Supreme Court ruling that I think limited death penalty for sex offenders, and he did another thing like that too. I can't remember what they were, and there was I think it may have had something to do with with the Patriot Act or surveillance, and there was a caterwauling that came from some quarters on the left, and he just responded openly and said, "Look, I never said I was a leftist," right? And it's true, like he never had, but it's what people wanted to believe, and it's not that they were simply gullible. I mean, he was seductive in that way, but I want to underscore, another point that you made just now, because I think it's important for all of us, like to take in, and not just about Obama, but if you look at that 2004 speech at the Democratic Convention that catapulted him onto the national, well, that and Wall Street money, catapulted him onto the national stage. It was basically like a Booker T. Washington style up from slavery speech, like adjusted to kind of weave the immigrant story in and Heartland, Midwest, and all the rest of that. But more to the point, in the summer of 08, you remember the speech that he gave here, which many people took to be his race speech, right? Right. What he said in that speech was he made references or really allusions to something that a lot of scholars have talked about for 2 decades now, which is the extent to which social policy measures that were enacted in the New Deal often had an unintended effect, basically, of or usually unintended effect of intensifying economic inequality by race. So he makes an allusion to that fact, like the not the GI Bill so much, although people say that about the GI Bill too, but federal housing policy, the early years of Social Security, and so forth and so on. But that's just an allusion that he makes, and he doesn't draw any contemporary implications for public policy from those allusions. It's like a fillip or some Mardi Gras trinkets that he tosses out to that portion of his audience. But the rest of the speech is attacking black poor people, right? And then later, like the Father's Day speech, that was all about attacking black poor people. And then there's that odious speech that he gave at some church in Houston, where he chastised black poor people again for feeding their kids Popeye's chicken for breakfast or something like that, right?
Yeah, you're Professor Reed, you are reminding me of some of those key points that really, as much as I admire, and I say this all the time, I really admire and like President Obama, but there are just some fundamental things I disagree with him on. And some of the things that you just mentioned reminds me of that deep division in a fundamental way of thinking about the problems that we face. And he most assuredly comes from that meritocracy side of the equation, where he believes just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I was reading his book, I think it was Dreams of My Father, where he laid out this very concise and precise language of what he believes and how the government isn't the solution to every problem, and that all these things that just speaks volumes about what he believes, but we missed it, or we didn't see it, or we allowed his language to drift us away into the moment and not realize that he really brought a lot of the same things, just wrapped it up in this beautiful, I'm thinking this was Professor Glaude saying that he used the language of overcoming, and the language of Exodus, and the language of the civil rights movement to coddle us, and not to coddle us, but to put us to sleep, and actually pulled off this amazing moment for neoliberal politics. Go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, the book the Maoists used to call using the red book to defeat the red book, basically, right? I mean, he's always said, right, from the very beginning, and like this is like another sort of odd moment of the '08 campaign, where I found myself agreeing with Geraldine Ferraro, who was never really my cup of tea, but she pointed out that this, that his one big trick, right, as a pony, was the claim that there's something about him that will bring about agreement among people with people who fundamentally disagree with him. And Ferraro said at one point, frustratedly, of course, because she was working for Clinton, that that's just not how politics works, right? Like, it doesn't work that way, and you can only sell yourself as having that particular talent if you've never really fought for anything before. And sure enough, like we see what happened with healthcare reform, for instance, like he didn't want to get his hands dirty with it. So he just kind of sat back and let Congress bring something to him. And then he spent, I forget how many years now, trying to get one Republican to vote for it. I mean, because the thing was that his whole shtick is holding himself above the fray of of partisan bickering.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what that means is that, as you say, you're already capitulating to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's like, you know, on the neoliberalism point. I mean, I've been saying two things about that in the last couple of years. One of them is, you know, there's more than a cottage industry now, right? There's a small industry, or maybe not so small at this point, of academics, left, right, and center, parsing what neoliberalism is supposed to be and isn't, what its distinctive features are supposedly. But in my view, it really just comes down as a practical matter to one simple thing, that neoliberalism is capitalism that's effectively foreclosed any possibility of working class opposition. So that just means that it's capitalism that's completely in charge. So that in that sense, it's not a matter, or the problem that we have now shouldn't be understood as a deviation from a new normal that got constructed after the Second World War for 2 or 3 decades. What we have now is like going back to normal, and that those 2 or 3 decades are the aberration that needs to be explained. Wow. And why I think that's important as a perspective to keep in mind is that the Obama administration has, well, look, I mean, you take, for instance, what I want to mention too, I think it's connected with this, the point you made about his commitment to an abstract meritocratic vision, which is a class vision. But that goes a long way to explaining why he and his former basketball buddy, Arnie Duncan, have been hell-bent on destroying public education as we know it, because they think that public education, like most public institutions, are for losers. Mm. And they are for losers if you govern from a standpoint that presumes that rich people are smarter than the rest of us and know what's best for all the rest of us. And I can tell you, after teaching at joints like this for the last 35 years, there's nothing farther from the truth than that.
Right. You know, all of this on President Obama, I want to let it underscore the fact that we really shouldn't be surprised about this endorsement. It's par for the course, right? This is just the exact thing that we expect him to do, and something that we really shouldn't linger on so much from a lamenting point of view.